All right, good afternoon, and welcome to JTeen's January 21st, 2021. That's 1/21/2021, which I think is kind of cool. Um, we have a phenomenal set of facilitators, presenters today who are going to share their expertise and experience with us in working together collaboratively and in helping us really understand the importance of professional mentorship in the Jewish teen space. So without further ado, I'll let each of you introduce yourself, although most people probably know who you are. Betsy Stone and Jodie Goldberg. It's all yours.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to first start by speaking for both of us and say that we really would like this to be interactive and occasionally interrupting. And so please don't be patient and polite. Be a master of your own learning, and make sure that you ask what you want to ask and that we talk about what you want to talk about. I'm Betsy Stone. I think I'm retired. A friend of mine says I'm reincarnated. And I'm a psychologist. I teach a little bit at HUC and at Hebrew Union College in New York, and a lot these days on Zoom, which has actually been for me in the pandemic a true lifesaver, because it allows me to still feel like I'm making a difference in the world, which is really important to me. And one of my favorite people to work with, both live and on Zoom, is Jodie Goldberg.
Amazing. Betsy, the feeling is mutual. Betsy and I not only work together, but recently I've become a part of her Chavruta circle. So we've become partners and learning Chavruta, which is a truly beautiful relationship. I'm Jodie Goldberg. I'm a teen engagement consultant at the Jewish Education Project. And really my work and role is to support youth and teen professionals, mainly in the New York area, through professional development and through networks. And I'm also a Cornerstone faculty member this summer, so very excited to be running the teen track this summer at Cornerstone for returning camp professionals. So Betsy and I wanted to begin today by doing a quick activity to kind of take everyone's pulse. It's a really fun activity that I actually give to other youth and teen professionals, and then unpack it by saying, how might you actually use this with your youth and teens in your setting? So it's a really fun, what I call meme match. So what I want to invite all of you to do is take a look at these memes and to think about one of these memes that's embodying how you as a professional are feeling right now. Are you feeling bombarded by emails or text messages that are just overwhelming you? Are you actually feeling gratitude for what's happening around you? Or do you feel like you're trying to do so many things that you're actually jump roping with a horse? So I want to invite you to think about which one of these might be how you're feeling right now. And in a moment, I'm going to take the screen away and just have a few people share. So when you've got yours, can you just give me a thumbs up so I know that amazing. It looks like people have got it for the most part. Fabulous. Okay, so I want to invite a few people to share. Who would like to share kind of which one is embodying where they are at this moment? Yeah, Mara and then Mike.
Sure. I was a mix between Kermit and Judy Garland next to him. That's where I'm at in my current role. A little bit overwhelmed as usual, but also just like chill, but also sick of emails. So.
Amen. I think we can all relate to some degree. And if it's not emails that are overwhelming you, it might be Zoom or text message or other forms of media that might be feeling your way. So Mara, thank you. Mike.
So I definitely feel like Kermit. I feel a little overwhelmed at this second of right now. I feel like I only add things to my to-do list. I don't take anything away.
Amen. And if I were to ask all of you if that's also a feeling you're feeling, to raise your hand. Amazing. Mike, it sounds like a familiar feeling. Can I get one more person to share? Yes, Samantha.
I felt like the cat getting hit in the face with all of the emails until they fell over. I try to structure my day to have email time and then time where I'm doing other things. But then my like quest for inbox zero just is a ongoing failure. And each time something new comes in, I'm just like, like Mike was saying, it only adds to the to-do list. Somehow nobody ever emails me saying like, I've taken care of it, you're done.
Absolutely. What an amazing point, right? And I'm sure that's a feeling we can all relate to. And so what I actually normally, and I won't do this today because we have little time, but I actually invite people to be the meme. And for 10 seconds to actually embody that meme, be that meme. And it's unbelievable to see some of the things that you see. And the reason why, just to kind of unpack with you as youth professionals, why I do this activity is, positive psychology tells us if we can embody or kind of name the emotion that we're feeling right now, we're more able to move past it. So I wanted to open and start with this by saying, I know that there are a million emails flying. I know that you're trying to jump rope with a horse. I know that you're crumbling in your seat. And what might you do to put some of that away for the moment? So for the next 50 minutes, we can really be present and learn with and from one another. And I'm happy to share that fun meme activity, which you can do, not just with your youth and teens, but also in this mentorship relationship in order to check in both at the beginning, which might look different, and then to do it again at the end to see where you might be. So thanks for that introduction. And really, thank you, Deb. And Betsy and I really wanted to start this by doing a short sort of, word cloud with you. And we wanted to ask, when you think of a mentorship relationship, what are some of the amazing qualities of both a mentor and a mentee? And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put in the chat a link to something called an answer garden. So I want to invite you to open up the answer garden on your screen and to choose a word or two that might embody someone who was an amazing mentor or mentee. So we'll take a moment to do that. Can everybody access the answer garden? Is it showing up on your screen? Fabulous. Beautiful. So I want to invite you to take a moment, and then Betsy's going to help us unpack that. And I'll share my screen so you can see the answers coming in. So I'm seeing supportive, listening. Nice. You can come up with as many or as few as you'd like. Honest, sounding board, connector, open-minded, patient. Interesting. I'm seeing this word supportive and the word listener rise to the top. Other things. Caring, patient, retrospective, sounding board, knowledgeable, generous. Yeah. Betsy, you want to take it away?
Sure. So I'm really struck by this, by what we have here, and I'm struck by it because I actually think that being a mentor is one of the most complicated relationships that we get into. So I'm going to, Jodie, can you hold on to this so that it doesn't disappear? So I have it for part 2. Okay. I want to start by thinking about the aspects of mentoring, and then Jodie's going to talk a little bit, and then I'm going to talk about some of the characteristics of mentoring. We have parsed these apart that in a way that makes sense to us. Hopefully, it does to you. Let's start with the idea that mentoring is based on a relationship, not on a goal. So that if my And I think this is a really important distinction, that coaching is much more based on a goal. How are we going to get from point A to point B? So whether we're going to Weight Watchers, which is not mentoring but coaching, or we're trying to learn a musical instrument, which is not mentoring but teaching, it is most of our relationships, most of our learning relationships are based on a long-term goal rather than a long-term relationship. One of the things I have learned about mentoring kind of writ large is that because it's based on the relationship, I don't actually always get to pick the people that I mentor. That in fact, sometimes people choose you to be their mentor, even though you didn't engage in that relationship. I'll give you an example of this. It's a really simple example. The week of January 6th, I heard from a rabbi that I had taught 15 years ago, maybe longer, who said to me, I don't know what I'm going to preach about. And I thought, why are you asking me? Well, in fact, she's asking me because in her head, I'm in that long-term relationship. Even whether, and that is whether or not I have actually agreed to be in that relationship. I think that one of the really important things to understand about a true mentor is that those are not relationships you get to exit, as much as those are relationships where you are voted in by somebody else, which is a complicated part of the mentoring experience. Mentoring is driven by the goal of development, not by the goal of performance. So that where I might want it in a coaching relationship, and that's the contrast I think that's most salient to me, in a coaching relationship, my job is to get you to do something to develop some skills. But in a mentoring relationship, my goal is actually to have you develop you, and to be more sure of who you are and what you are and where you're going. So that, again, longer term goals and not so much performance driven as development, human driven. One of the other aspects of mentoring is that design is actually part of mentoring. An explicit mentoring relationship, which is not what the rabbi who called me and I are in, but in an explicit mentoring relationship, goals are jointly agreed upon, and they are jointly evaluated, so that I am not just saying I want to do this, but I want to grow in these ways. I want you to help me learn to do this kind of thing and learn about myself. And as we develop the relationship and as I develop skills, the goals may change, but we will continue to articulate them, so that I am both in the relationship and watching the relationship at the same time. I think that all of these thus far are incumbent not only upon the mentor, but also on the mentee. That the mentor, in a good mentoring relationship, the mentor is also changing. The mentor is also learning. That it is not, it's not one person feeding the other, although that is the primary direction, but there is some mutual feeding of knowledge of oneself. Because of that, mentoring has to have lots of space for evaluation. How are we doing? What are we doing? What could we be doing better? What mistakes did we make? What kinds of additions do we need to add? How do we do this better? And so it may be that you say to me in a mentoring relationship, I don't like it when you use that word. Then if I'm the mentor, I have to adapt to that. I have to get feedback and respond to feedback. As the mentee, I have to get feedback and respond to feedback. And so unlike, for example, coaching, which is really a much more directional relationship, a mentoring relationship is less completely directional. And finally, before Jodie gets a chance to talk, we have to understand that mentoring relationships are always, by their nature, fluid relationships. That they don't necessarily require a lot of care and feeding all the time, but they do require people to be able to adapt to different circumstances. And so the rules of a mentoring relationship are constantly shifting and being evaluated and reevaluated. In a truly formal, time-limited mentoring relationship, we're actually probably doing more coaching than mentoring. But in an ideal mentoring relationship, the actual nature of the relationship changes over time. So Jodie's going to talk to you some about the Find Your Summer program, which is a New York City program that uses mentors, and give you an idea of how this looks in the flesh And then we're going to take a minute and ask for questions. Go, Jodie.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks, Betsy. I'm Jodie, everyone. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the Find Your Summer program. During this section, I'm going to talk just a little bit about what it is and how it's structured, which might influence how you want to, you might want to adapt or borrow some of the structure. And then after Betsy speaks again, I'm going to talk to you about some of the core principles that we're thinking about when we think about the mentorship relationship. So really, the Find Your Summer Ambassadors program is a unique mentorship relationship in that we have 4 senior youth professionals mentoring 10 newer career professionals. And so it's not, it's 2 people who are in the same field, but one who we've marked as more senior with maybe more years of experience, and one who's a little bit newer. So it's a little bit like a peer-to-peer, which is exciting and offers some new challenges as well. We have a combination of individualized sessions where people are meeting one-to-one twice. And then the third time is actually a group session. So when you're thinking about your mentorship relationship, what are the differences between those individual sessions, and what might a group session look like? And how might a group session elevate some of the common themes that are being brought up within the individual sessions? And how, as Betsy said, could actually the professionals not be mentors to one another, but really think about this idea of we can learn from anybody and really learn from one another in a significant way. This mentoring relationship is created based on shared experience. So we have 6 different workshops based on how youth and teens thrive that the mentees go to throughout the year. And then in between those sessions are the mentor-mentee relationship meetings. So they're not just talking about their own growth and character development, but actually responding to content. So to think about in your mentor-mentee relationships, what's that content that you might want to bring in that could help, that your mentees might want to respond to? What could that look like? And if there isn't content, how might that arc change or differ? And so those are kind of the key sort of facets and of components of the Find Your Summer group that meets. They meet 3 different times over the course of a 6-month period. And then what I'm going to do is kind of talk about, Betsy will ask for questions now. And then after Betsy speaks it again, I will actually talk about some of the 2 or 3 big questions that we are thinking about in regards to mentoring.
So thank you, Jodie. So Ben, I know you have a question. Do you want me to read it, or will you share it?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yep.
I'm curious to know, you spoke about the idea of being in it versus
And watching it.
and really and holding both, and I'm just curious as to, is that something that happens one and then the other? Is it happening at the same time? Could you parse those out for us?
Absolutely. Great question. It's actually a skill set, the ability to be watching yourself in action. The way we develop it is that we watch ourselves after the fact, so that I go back to the meeting we just had and think, what did I do there? Why did I do it? It means I take notes of not only of the content of the meeting, but of how I'm participating. And if I were trying to learn how to do this, this is what I learned how to do in graduate school in psychology. I would start with a piece of paper that had a line down the middle as I was taking notes, and this would be the content, and this would be me, so that I could actually think about not only what are we talking about, but what am I doing as we're talking about those things. So look, recording meetings gives you the real opportunities to do that if you want to go back and look at them. what ends up happening is that you develop the skill to actually be able to watch yourself while you're doing it, and then you're home. And the kinds of questions I might ask myself are, why did I say it that way? Why did I respond when I responded? What was the impact of what I did versus what was my intention for what I did? So for example, I could respond to a question meaning to help you, but really shutting you down, right? So if, Ben, you had asked this same question and I had said, I would think that was obvious, no one would have asked another question, right? It would have been a total shut up response. And so one of the things you do is you watch yourself in action and try to figure out not only what you were intending, but what you actually did and what was the impact, the interpersonal impact. Does that help? Great. Other questions on what we've done thus far? Yes, Jodie's going to share something now. You're going to share the screenshot from, right? Okay. So what I want to talk about is the different aspects of mentoring, the different things that we see, kinds of people we are in mentoring relationships. And I'm going to give you 5 words that are, I think, part of the mentoring relationship at different times. And so when you're doing that, watching yourself do this, these are the 5 that I think you're likely to see. The first one, and then Jodie share it, okay? The first one is we parent in mentoring relationships. We say things like, you can't get away with that. That's a parenting kind of remark. In parenting, we establish the power structure as vertical as opposed to horizontal. We can play the age card, we can play the wisdom card, we can play the experience card, but all of those aspects are part of parenting when I mentor. And sometimes it's demanded by what's happening in the relationship right then, and other times it's really incredibly inappropriate. It really shuts things down. So that's the first one. The second one is supporting. It was interesting on our word cloud, we saw supportive as a word that was a big word. The part of supporting that I struggle with when I'm mentoring is that I actually think that it very often includes a lack of constructive criticism. That very often when I'm supporting, I'm saying, you did a wonderful job, without and I think next time. And if I'm just saying to you, you did a wonderful job, I'm not really doing anything except stroking you. Now, sometimes we need to be stroked, and sometimes that's a really important part of the work. But if the relationship is primarily supportive, I actually don't think we're growing human beings. I think we're actually saying, we're keeping people in the same root-bound pot. And so when I have a mentor, I want that mentor to say to me, you did this well, and, as opposed to you did this well. That's the second part. The third part of mentoring that is, I think, an essential part, and is, again, because mentoring relationships are fluid, a piece that we go in and out of, is partnering. That mentoring is peer-driven at times, that part of the job of a mentor is actually to say, I'm not sure what to do here. What do you think we should do? Because that's part of the way we grow other people. So I will say, this is a kind of a silly example, but if I'm coming to speak to an organization, one of the things, and they say to me, do you want breakout groups? Which is a pretty common question that I get. I say to them, tell me what you want and what works in your place. Because I'm not an expert at somebody else's shul. I'm an expert at the content that I have, but I want to be able to say, no, we're doing this together. Does your community do this well? Do you have people in your community that need to be managed? Because if that's the case, then breakout groups are a really bad idea. Is this part of your minhag? I want to know from the person that I'm working with that we are working together, and that's I would call that peer driven. And I think mentors have to do that. Part of the reason mentors have to do that is that if I take responsibility for all the choices, I'm actually saying I'm better than you at this, which means doesn't leave a lot of room for people to grow. And it absolutely doesn't leave room for people to grow into themselves. It only leaves room for them to grow into me, which is absurd. The fourth part of mentoring is coaching. Coaching is, as I said earlier, it's goal-driven. It is about solving a problem, creating a program. It is about making a product. And it is an incredibly important part of mentoring, but you heard the word part in there, that when we mentor, we don't simply work towards goals, we work towards the development of humans. And the final part of mentoring, which I think is may fall under coaching some of the time, it may fall under parenting some of the time, is teaching. Some of that teaching is when I say, when I first did this, I screwed it up. That is a form of teaching. It is a form of supporting. But some of the teaching is simply saying, I think that there are resources here, or I would do it this way, as long as you leave room for somebody to do it a different way. So there is an acknowledgement that there is a knowledge differential about some aspects of the work. But I think it's really important in mentoring that we actually recognize that there is an opposite knowledge differential in other aspects of the work. So I may know this content, but I don't know these people. And both of those are really important. So Jodie, if you would put that slide back up, thank you. Or not. So notice what we have up here. Supportive is the big word. And I think it's an important word, but I think it's not the only word. Generous is absolutely part of mentoring. It is that is both in the supporting and in the teaching. And I think it's also in the peer-driven partnering. Because if I am generous with power, I actually am growing you in a different kind of way. Willing to learn. Mentors have to learn as much as mentees do. They have to learn about the other person. They have to learn about the setting. Open-minded, sounding board. These all make lots of sense. But if I were making this, supportive wouldn't be the only big one. Because I think that there's so much else that a good mentor is and a good mentee is. So now, Jodie, you're back on.
Amazing. Thank you.
Can I
So,
ask a question?
yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry. The word supportive, as you're talking about it, I agree with what you're saying. I wonder if people are using that word less because they think it should be part of that relationship, and more that they just need people to support them. Like they don't have people around them, and not just like you're doing good kind of support, but just cheerleaders, people who get the work that they're doing and who, encourage them to move forward and stay in their job and not run away and all of that.
So I was using the word supportive in a more narrow way, Erica, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think you're even righter right now, because I think we all need much more support right now than we have ever needed before. I think that the sense that we are at the end of our tethers has gotten incredibly familiar, and unpleasantly so. So yes, in the way of, you can do this, and I believe in you, and that was well done. Absolutely. Just want in my head, because this is what I want for me probably, is you can do this, and once you know that I've heard the you can do this. One of the problems that we sometimes get into in mentoring relationships, in all of our relationships, is that we focus more on the what you did poorly or more on what you did well. And if you're a person who focuses on what I did poorly, I'm not going to be able to go back to you under these circumstances. And if you focus only on what I did well, I'm not going to grow. So it's got to be, they've got to be woven together. Thank you. You're absolutely right. And I was probably using the word too narrowly. So Jodie, go ahead, and then we'll ask for questions again.
Amazing. So two things that we were thinking about structurally, or two big questions that we had mentors and mentees think about together, which I think are important questions in any sort of mentorship relationship. The first one is, what is the arc of my mentorship relationship? And I have this great kind of photo to show you. Where does this relationship begin, right? Where is it going to take us? And how are we going to end it? And here's the tricky part about an imposed, an imposed time frame.
I was supposed to talk about that.
That's okay. That's okay, Betsy. I can talk about it, and we can guys back. And is in our thing per se, we have 3 intentional sessions, right? So there's an arc of learning, which starts at the beginning, has a middle trajectory, and then has an end. But what happens if you have this amazing mentor-mentee relationship that wants to go on organically beyond that end date, right? So there are 2 different kinds of relationships. There are those that are mentor-mentee relationships, those that are more imposed, right? Which say you have 3 sessions, and then there might be one that's more organic that actually goes on beyond the 3, the 4, the 5 sessions. And my guess is that right now, many of you are about to enter into an imposed relationship. But how might you think about how that might grow from imposed to organic? How might you need to water that relationship so the seeds can grow, so it goes beyond that time? And also, how can you know when it actually might be time to end, right? We can't force relationships to go on past their time. I have been in, and I'm sure you can all think of experiences where you've been in an amazing imposed relationship that's gone on for years or centuries. And then maybe you were in an imposed, an organic relationship that maybe was really nice for the year while you were in a certain setting, but then maybe you grew out of it. So how, as you as the mentee or you as the mentor, what tools or skills can you bring to help water that to grow beyond, as something to really think about? And the second piece that we're really thinking about in the Find Your Summer Ambassadors program with the mentors and mentees is really negotiating that relationship, right? In an imposed mentorship relationship, 2 people are put together either because one has a skill the other wants to learn, or you think personalities might go well together. There's a gut reason why you might put people together. But what happens in that first meeting, especially when we have to maybe have that meeting in a virtual space, right? How do we begin? How do we begin to understand each other? And how do we begin to create a standard for us to explore what do we mean when we say mentorship, right? Because it's going to be very different for you than it might be for me. And how are we going to show up for one another, right? And you can have that conversation point blank, but I think the most amazing thing is that you are having this relationship within a Jewish context and setting. So you can actually use Jewish sources to read together in a mentor-mentee relationship and to think about how you might want to negotiate or show up for each other. So I want to give you a few sources that we've actually sourced for our mentors and mentees and tried out. And all three sources have their own excitement and challenges. Some you've seen before, some you haven't. And I'll quickly show them to you. So the first one that we challenged our professionals to think about is one you actually know. Make for yourself a mentor, acquire yourself for a friend, and judge every person meritoriously. And really, what does it mean to make a mentor? What do we even mean when we say the word mentor? Is it support to you? Is it not? Is it a good listener? How might you define it? And what is the responsibility of me as the mentor? And what is the responsibility of us in our relationship? So this is one set of texts that you might use to begin thinking about how you might negotiate. Yeah.
It's interesting because the Hebrew doesn't say mentor, right? There's no Hebrew word for it.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And I think we have kind of pushed it here to say that. And right, I think that's an even more poignant point because I think it's even friend in the Hebrew, or it's something.
It's teacher, I think. Different. I think it's teacher.
Teacher, right? So right, and it's interesting based on what Betsy just said, right? Here I'm interpreting teacher to be mentor, but how are you interpreting it? And I think that's the beauty of this kind of setting the stage of what we mean when we say mentor, and what kind of relationship are we going to have? And is it going to actually be more of a teacher-student relationship, or is it really going to feel more like one where we can come together and more chavruta-esque, right? But I think that's for you, for the mentor and the mentee to decide. And that's the beauty of something like this. Another text you can use, and we're not going to read it now, is really one of the relationship between Moses and Jethro. And how might you use this text to think about who is the mentor and who is the mentee, and how Jethro might actually be a mentor to Moses, or one might say not at all, right? And how can we understand this relationship? And the last one I want to share, somebody actually, a guy named Mike Mellon, who many of you might know, shared with me, which is from Rabbi Shoshana Gelfand, where she really talks about, it's her own kind of davar, how has God been a mentor for Moses? Or maybe how has he not? And what can we learn from this kind of relationship that may on the outset not look like a mentor-mentee, but how is it being expressed? And so I, as the program director, really challenged the mentors to choose one of these texts, bring it to their first meeting, and to think about how they're going to negotiate that relationship so that they're on the same page, they're speaking the same language, and they're able to begin on the right foot together to hopefully a relationship that feels organic and not one that feels imposed. So thank you. I hope that was helpful in your own thinking. And we want to ask, Betsy, you might want to fill something in. I'm seeing you want to share, or if you have any questions.
Well, I think this is part of the answer to Ben's question earlier. How do you watch it and be in it? And it's that you talk about it. You talk about it by yourself, and you talk about it in the space between the two of you. Questions, ideas, arguments. Really? Go ahead, Erica. You go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, something I'll throw out there, and Jodie and I have talked about this before, is the challenge of time, and not only the fact that like we only see teens who we're mentoring for a short period of time, but also the relationship that they see us with our teens is short. So they only see us as like, if they're on a youth group board, they see us in that one context. Anything outside of that is not something they're used to. And so to get them to kind of build and understand that takes a lot of time. And sometimes by the time you reach so much time, you're like through the halfway of your year. So that's something I think a lot about when working with teens, is this time crunch, and what you're saying, what they like see us as, and what's kind of imposed versus what the opportunity is. And I think that there's a challenge opportunity there, but that's something that I throw out to the group.
So 2 comments. One is the more expansively you see your role within appropriate limits, the more opportunities they will perceive to engage with you in different ways. That's number 1. Number 2, this has got to be one of the upsides of COVID, that in fact, they are more available because they can't go to every practice, et cetera, and may very well want more from you because they're lonely. And so you may actually have more opportunity to do some of the mentoring now than you would typically have had. But it'll be different. It's two-dimensional. But the aspect of mentoring that is, long-term building a human being, I think that's always been an incredibly important part of the work of youth professionals. And I think historically, congregations thought of youth professionals more as babysitters and shepherds. You're going to manage the kids because they're crazy, rather than developers. I think you're developers. And I think what the job of a youth professional, the job of anybody who works with teens and young adults, is to be working on growing their humanity. There are so many ways to do that. But if we keep that as a vision, as opposed to the vision is, how do I get them to write the program? It changes the nature of the relationship. Does that make sense, Matt?
Yes, it does. And I think, right. And I think it's also the, to our parents and to even people surrounded by our teens, that we have to change their perspective, because I think there's still, I think to what you said is really true. For a lot of our parents, I know, is that they're used to their youth group being, like the babysitting, like this is where I send my kid once a week. And for some of our teens, they've started to see how it's different. But for a lot of our parents, they actually don't know that we do deeper work than that, because they send their kid and they're not involved. Right. But that's not the same with like their college counselors. I know they're involved with the college counselors every minute, every step. So, right. So how do we, so it's also the dynamic there too with these parents a little bit, is how do we shift it in that way too? As I've noticed.
Right. So there are ways that we can do that. If you're in a congregation, I think it is really important for the clergy to be presenting you as both professionals, and therefore paying you like professionals, and to be elevating you as a member of the real staff as opposed to the junior staff. You should be at staff meetings. I mean, it just seems like such a no-brainer to me. But the other piece of this is finding ways to explore with parents, either in a group or one-on-one, I think more effectively probably in a group, what it is that you're doing when you're trying to grow people. And really use language that challenges some of that babysitting, keeping them out of trouble language that parents may impose. Other questions or comments? Erica, you look like something's about to jump out of your mouth.
No, I mean, just to go on the point that you just ended with, I find that when I keep parents in the loop, then they get the value of that relationship. So even if it's a simple, which happened the other day, I was with Zipporah, who was tutoring a student in conversational Hebrew. And it was the first time that I was in the same place with the tutor and the tutee, I don't know, the student. And it was amazing. Like, as a mom, I was like cavelling, and I was also so excited for this girl who was working with Zipporah. So I texted the mom, I want you to know I'm here, like, live with both of these people, and she's doing such an amazing job, and I just love to hear it. And just her, response back to me in appreciation. So she sees I'm investing in her kid. She sees that I care about her kid. And because I care and invest, I now have a higher value to her as a professional. So I think when we're able to make those real relationship connections, not only with our students or teens, but also with their families, I think we actually can begin to change the conversation about who we are and what our role might actually be.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Although let's be clear that part of the dynamic also has to do with age, and that being an age peer gives you creds that being a lot younger allows people to subtract. So there is that issue as well. We want to talk about, are we ready to talk about what are the kind of critical aspects of building these relationships? These are the critical aspects of building relationships with adolescents. They're also the critical aspects of building relationships with mentors and mentees. Remember, it goes both directions. And they're really very simple. Saying they're very simple does not necessarily mean they're easy to do. The first one is that you have to be explicit that you care about people. People need to hear that they matter. And particularly now, we need to hear that we matter. That doesn't mean I have to say I love you all the time. And it surely doesn't mean I should say I love you a lot of the time. But what it does mean is I have to say to you, I'm thinking about you. When I ask somebody how you are, particularly in COVID, if I ask somebody how you are and they say I'm fine, I either can accept that or I can say no, really, because none of us are fine. And that's a way simply of expressing care. Expressing care is a core part of all human relationships. Another part of the mentor-mentee relationship is challenging people to grow. Can you think of another way to do that? If that doesn't work, what is your backup plan? To give people opportunities that are not threatening, but allow them to grow and give them opportunities to think about what growth would look like. The third is to support people, not in that, oh my God, everything's wonderful support, but to say, I really like this part of what you did. I really thought you nailed that. And support, I think, is much more effective when it's specific. That the support I give you when I say to you, oh, you did a great job, for most of us just goes right over our heads. I don't know what you're talking about. But if you say, I really learned this, I really liked this, then I actually know you heard something, which is pretty important. Fourth critical aspect of developing relationships and mentor relationships is sharing power. If in the relationship I make it very clear that I have the right to judge you and you don't have the right to judge me, or that I get that no matter what the decision is, it's ultimately mine, I'm not teaching you very much. I'm teaching you to be passive. I'm teaching you to wait. And sharing power has to allow for room for people to make mistakes. There are very few mistakes that we make in most of our work that are tragic. And we have to be allowed to make little mistakes because little mistakes are how we learn. And the fifth part is very similar to challenging growth, is expand possibilities. Think about what else you could do. Think about what other options there are. That may be within the context of the job. It may be beyond the context of the job. And it may be, I have a book you could read. That is an expansion of possibilities, right? I want you to read this book and we're going to talk about it. Simply to give people the opportunity to see themselves in a more expansive rather than retracted way. So what we want to do now, Jodie, do we want to do this now? Is we want you to go back. She's going to put yet another link in the chat box. And we want you to now, I'm waiting. We want you to now do the exact same exercise. What words would you use to describe mentor-mentee relationships that have value and worth to you? And Jodie, would you put that up on the screen as they start to populate? Thank you.
Yeah, can everyone access it? Great, fabulous.
There's something about this guy on the bottom in his underwear that I think is really interesting, Jodie.
I know. I'm trying to get it out of the screen.
No, it's fine. We're all enjoying it.
I know. Okay. Go. Just refreshing the page.
Okay.
There we go. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to refresh it one more time.
I love the mutual respect. I love the mutual respect. I love the growth. I love the understanding. Look at those things. This is a very different word cloud than our previous word cloud. And it may be that I just shamed you out of the word supportive, but what you're describing here is a relationship that's based on the idea of growth rather than the relationship that's based on the idea of holding someone up and making sure they feel okay. So now I have a final question for you. We have a final question for you. Because Jodie and I both believe that if we don't, that we need to write things down to be able to get them in our brains. So take a minute and put in the chat box something you learned, something you're going to do differently, something that you're still thinking about, anything that you would like to share with this group about what happened for you over the course of the last hour. Thank you, Deb.
Deb, did you want to share something? I saw the off mute.
I was going to ask for the question again because I didn't hear it.
Because she wasn't listening.
Oh, I made a snarky comment to Erica about the underwear coming up and it being supportive.
I'm sorry, right? That's what happens when you have free applications. So really the question is, what are you taking away? What resonated with you from this hour? What questions are you still thinking about? And what are you interested in thinking more about? And some of these answers are beautiful. Thinking of the duality of the way mentors handle the relationship is something I definitely want to think more about. Amanda, could you say a little bit more of that? That's beautiful.
I think that, in my own journey professionally, I have kind of taken opportunities to move up, but they've always just been opportunities that have prevented them or just kind of presented themselves. And I've never really learned, I think, how to be a good mentor. So, I think having a mentor would kind of teach me that. But as I'm thinking of the people that are on my staff that I do have a mentor relationship with, it is more coaching and driving and being supportive and cheerleading, but I don't really ever think of the way that I handle that relationship. So I just think it's interesting.
So I think one of the really interesting aspects of this, Amanda, is it's not that one of these is bad and the other one is good. I don't mean to be saying that at all. I think that what the thing that mentors do that is different is the care and feeding of people as opposed to the care and feeding of tasks. And it's not that one is useful and the other one is not. They are both important. But I think that it really requires somebody who wants to grow and be fed. And I also think that if I am growing and feeding other people, it's going to impact me. I'm going to be changed by that without even really thinking about it, by that interaction. Not being afraid to be critical, Leora, I think that that one of the things we learn in relationships over time is what kind of criticism can be heard. And that, if you think about this in terms of your friendships or your partners or your siblings, we all know that there are people we can't say certain things to because they can't hear it. And so part of what we do in learning how to be critical is that we have to figure out not just how I can be critical, but how I can be critical with you. How you can hear what I have to say. Because if I say it and you can't hear it, it didn't do me any good and it didn't do you any good. And I think that when we're skilled, we teach the people who are in the room, we don't teach the content. And this is exactly that we teach the people, we mentor the people who are in the room. We don't mentor what are my beliefs. Easier said than done. So we filled another, what did they say? You've wasted another perfectly good hour. Is that car talk? I think it is car talk. I'm going to put my email in the chat box. Jodie, I'm sure will do the same, so you can reach out to either of us. And please let us know if we can be helpful, and enjoy looking at the relationships that you are currently in and figuring out which of them actually are mentoring relationships. And then if they are, what you might want to do. Oh, it is 4 Eastern time. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, both Betsy and Jodie, for this really interesting conversation. I loved the examples. I loved really helping to frame mentorship as J-Teen is getting ready to launch our brand new mentorship initiative. Everybody who's in the initiative is on this call, plus some other people as well. But the whole idea of organic and what was the word? Imposed. We're embarking on an imposed relationship right now, but I hope in so many ways that we are able to really make those true, important relationship connections that we will want to continue to nurture those relationships, and we will want to continue into that organic phase. I think that would be really amazing. As always, you two are brilliant, and we're inspired by your work, and we really appreciate everything that you're doing for the field. And thank you all so much for joining us today. Matt, you arrived for the closing, so.
It was a great closing.
But you recorded it, so.
I messaged him. I'm like, we're closing right now.
Right. I'm going to suggest to you something which I often suggest at the end of Zooms, which is if you don't have another meeting, this is time for the water cooler conversation. Jodie and I will leave, but I think one of the things we're really missing, as in our lives today is the conversation as you walk out of the room, the conversation in the men's room or the ladies' room, the conversation by the water cooler. So we're going to leave. And if you can, stay on and say hello to each other.
Don't
'Cause-
leave though. Remember, you're staying on with the mentors and the mentees.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Exactly what you just said is brilliant, except for today.